My name is Bastien Sachet, and I'm the CEO of Earthworm Foundation. Earthworm is a not-for-profit organization whose mission is the regeneration of the soils and the forests of our planet. We do this for and with the farmers, communities and workers we want to see respected and valued. We've done this for over 20 years by working with companies that are committed to change, looking into their supply chains and helping them answer three key questions. Where do my products come from? Who produces them? And how are they produced? In this series, we will discover the women and men who are asking these questions. Join me to learn more about what drives them and their ideas to regenerate our world. Today I have the pleasure to be with Will Gardiner. Will is the CEO of the Drax Group. Drax is an energy company that produces about 5% of the UK's energy, 6 to 12% of the renewable. You will explain a bit more about that. And Drax has undergone a very interesting transformation from what it was, which was a coal-based electricity production company, to what it is today, mostly focused on renewables. So we'll learn about that in the interview, but before we start, Will, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Bastien, and it's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story and a little bit more about Drax. I'm American, as you probably can tell. Been living in London for about 23 years. Came here with my wife and then 6-month-old son, and now have 3 kids who have all grown up much more English than I am. So I really enjoy London and have had a great time here. I've had a pretty varied career. I've been involved in finance and technology companies and joined Drax about 6 years ago. And I joined Drax, actually I went to the Paris COP just before joining Drax, really because I wanted to get involved more in climate change. And Drax has a really interesting story about how it transformed from coal to biomass. So I thought it would be a fascinating company to be involved with because they were really both pioneering, doing things that other people had never done before, but also in a quite challenging position because they were a single site power station that was really a whole company. So fundamentally I had real challenges to overcome.
So one thing that struck me when we met the first time is your passion for playing a role or having an impact on climate change. Where does that come from?
Well, I'll tell you sort of 2 things. One, I would say in a general sense, I've been involved in lots of different industries before. So for example, I was with a company that made Bluetooth chips for iPhones or Bluetooth chips for cars, etc. And it was a fascinating business and great products, great company. But when you get up in the morning and if you're having a difficult day, you can't really say, I'm making a real difference in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with Bluetooth chips, but not really fundamentally making a difference, right? So I really wanted a job where I could actually make a real difference. So not only was my job as the CEO of Drax to actually sort of deliver returns for shareholders, do the right thing for employees, stakeholders, but actually we could make a real difference in climate change. You ask why am I interested in climate change or why was I committed to that? I mean, I probably grew up in a family that had lots of political discussions around the dinner table, but lots of belief in doing the right thing. And I think the science is clear, the need to do something is clear, and I think for me, my passion is actually building a company and driving a company that actually not only does the right thing for our shareholders, for our people, but also for the planet. Right?
So tell us a little bit about that vision that you've developed or continued and evolved from where you took it as you were CFO, you became the CEO. What are the key ingredients of that vision? One thing you said to me was, I want to be the best ally of wind and solar, which you didn't see them as a competition, you see them as allies. Can you elaborate a bit about that?
So where Drax, again, came from is we converted the power station from coal to using wood pellets or sustainable biomass to generate power. And when I joined the company, there was a real question as to whether, was this a long-term part of the energy system or was it just a transitional solution? And I really have gotten much more passionate and have a very, very clear view and belief that it's a long-term part of the solution. And there's 2 reasons for that, or I would say in 2 ways I believe biomass can be key to the energy system. The first is, as you mentioned, as an ally for wind and solar. The second thing I wanted to add to that was that the other thing we are now doing is we're adding carbon capture and storage. Yeah. So BECCS, or bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, actually is something that is fundamentally unique, and there's a huge opportunity for that.
We'll come back to BECCS, but I wanted to dig a little bit into the biomass topic, because there are really two camps when we talk about forest biomass: the absolute fans who think it's great, and those who are against it. And you see really two camps fronting up and trying to find arguments to basically be the ones who are right. How do you see the problems, and how do you answer to those challenges?
So I think that that we need to change the nature of the debate. And so my own view is that the world, or big parts of the world, have already decided that they think that biomass should be used as part of the energy transition. So if you look at Europe recently and the proposals for so-called RED III, biomass plays a role. In Japan, they talk about doubling the use of biomass, so biomass plays a role. Same in the UK. So I think the question needs to move away from, is biomass just bad or is biomass just good, to how can it be used properly, right? Because fundamentally, I would see sort of biomass is not actually a standalone issue, but really part of a whole forest ecosystem, industrial ecosystem that has to be managed well. So the question really is, how should the forests be managed in a way that the forests are regrowing, they're healthy, they're leading to greater biodiversity, all of those good things, and then the things that come out of the forest are used in the best possible way.
Some people argue that the pressure on forest is so big that they can't cope with that pressure. So how do you, Drax, manage your impact on forest? What are you doing to manage that?
So the very baseline we have is that we have very clear and strict regulations for what we can do. So we need to be operating in ways that contribute to growing forests, so that there's more carbon tomorrow than there was yesterday. Mm-hmm. We need to be operating in forests in such a way that we don't harm biodiversity. And we go beyond that, and we want to have a positive impacts on forest communities, right? We want to actually operate in ways that we're actually leaving a positive imprint in 4 different areas. And we can talk more about the healthy forest landscapes projects that we're working on together. But one of the things, so the 4 things we want to do is have a positive carbon impact, have a positive biodiversity or positive nature impact, have a positive impact on the communities, and have a positive impact on the economies or the people who live there.
We have seen in the recent years forests going up in smoke. So every year now there is fires everywhere in the world, in sourcing regions, in forest, and we see that and we're like, okay, this is just directly contributing to climate change. Is there a way to stop that, or will biomass aggravate the situation?
So again, biomass, maybe the baseline point I would say is that biomass can be done in good ways, but it also can be done in bad ways. So it has to be managed quite carefully. And again, we should talk more about this, but for me, having good engagement across the spectrum with NGOs to get to the right standards so that we actually all can be comfortable it's done properly is a key part of the question. But we operate in really 2 different types of forests. So when we operate in the southeast of the US, the forests are growing, they tend to be healthy, and I think we play a positive role in that system. In other parts of the world where we operate, so for example, we source from Portugal, where there have been very bad forest fires, or we source from British Columbia, where again, bad forest fires this past summer. And absolutely, we can actually, if we take wood that otherwise, for example, would have been burnt at the side of the road, or if we can help clean up biomass or sort of residuals that have been left in the forest that ultimately could burn, or wood that's diseased and dying, which is a lot of what we do in British Columbia, we can have a very positive impact.
How did you personally learn about forest? Because you come from the tech space, you were a finance director, you basically dove into the biomass and the forest context. How did you personally got to understand the issues, the challenges, etc.?
Well, I would say 2 things. One is we are blessed at Drax with having lots of great expertise. We have people here who have spent their whole careers in the forest. They're foresters, or they're forest scientists, or they're sustainability foresters. So I've been able to really take advantage of a lot of their expertise and spend time with them. But the second thing I've done is I've spent time in the forest, right? And actually, when you get out there and you see the trees, you see how the harvesting actually works. You go to places that have been managed well, you go to places that have been managed badly. You meet some of the people who are directly involved in the communities. And it's really that personal aspect of it for me is very important, because if you don't go there, see it, understand it, sort of really experience it, I think it's hard to really get into it.
Storing carbon out of the chimney of the plant and storing it down. So you've been a pioneer on that. How have you evolved from there? I can see some pilots have been launched. Is it going fast enough?
So I'm probably never going fast enough, but I think we're going as fast as we can.
Okay.
So just to give you a bit of the context, I mean, we've done some work recently with a group called the Coalition for Negative Emissions,
Okay.
which effectively, so our view is that the world needs to remove between 5 and 10 gigatons of CO2 per year by the time we get to 2050, if we're going to stay within this 1.5 degrees of climate change. Right? BECCS, which is the technology that we use, which is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, can actually do, let's say 2 to 4 gigatons of carbon removal a year. So what are we doing now? So we're actually moving very fast to try to have the first one of those projects actually up and running. So we're testing our own technology. So we expect to be ready to actually start building CCS at the Drax power station in 2024. We're getting our permits that we need. The government will be, I think, supporting the building of infrastructure to do the transport of the CO2 and the storage. We expect that to start happening again in 2024. And then the key final piece in the puzzle is what is the regime by which the government will support the carbon removals in the UK, and we're working closely with them on that. So my hope is that by 2024 we will actually start building this new CCS plant in the UK, and then by 2027 we will be up and running. Operating
at scale. And you've developed partnerships with different technology providers?
We have. So we announced earlier this year a partnership with MHI, which is Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, to be our technology provider. So they've done quite a few carbon capture projects globally. This will be the first one using bioenergy. Okay. So that will be it'll be a world first. It also, our first unit will be 4 million tons a year. So again, that will be the largest carbon capture project I think ever done. And we're in the middle of actually sort of deciding who will be our design and construction partner. Again, we should announce that probably in October. Okay. So it's very exciting. It's moving quickly.
So you've really shifted the vision or accelerated the transition of the company in just a few years. What was the key ingredient, you think, to do that?
So when I became the CEO, I think the first thing I wanted to focus on was really just defining actually the purpose of the company. Right? And for me, there were sort of two things that were key to that purpose. One was, it had to come from sort of inside of me, something that I actually could be passionate and convicted and really believe in with conviction. So that's where we started. Then we actually did a lot of, I would say, quite structured work with my executive committee, with what we call the Drax leadership team, which is the top 50 people in the company, to actually define the words quite carefully of what that would mean. So it's a real combination of vision, if you will, conviction, but also structured work. And so we came up with actually what our purpose is, which is to enable a zero carbon, lower cost energy future. And again, you might imagine each one of those words quite carefully chosen. That was the first thing that we did. The next thing that we did, I think, which I actually think has also galvanized people behind what we want to do, is we declared this ambition to become a carbon negative company by 2030, right? And then again, I think that was actually quite interesting because we did that quite quickly, right? We said, okay, Madrid, it was COP, I can't remember the number, COP 25 or 24 in Madrid, and basically we said, here's an opportunity to get something out there, and we said, let's go for it. Let's be carbon negative. So that was quite fun. Yeah.
So setting the vision is key and the purpose, because it really gets people on board. And you mentioned you're working with your team. So what is your recipe to work with a team and to get people galvanized around the same objective?
So I think it starts with, when I think about sort of the key aspects of the team, and it's really, I've been now CEO for 4 years, and I think it's taken me a while to get to the team that I really want. It starts with what are the real important personal qualities that people have. Because for everyone who is either could be a member of that team, they all have the qualifications, right? They all know how to do the things that need to get done. They have the skills, right? But do they have the qualities, right? And to me, what are the qualities? Transparency, collaboration. I mean, there's a whole set of qualities which are really key for me, right? The second thing which I think is right important, and this is sort of a new idea for me, is I really want people in my senior team who have a leadership style which is to let others lead them, in a sense. It's not lead from the top, it's almost lead from the bottom. I mean, leaders in Drax should be about helping enable their people to do their best. That's another thing. And then the final thing I think is really important about the team is you need people who are comfortable with ambiguity and comfortable with paradox, because the world is changing so quickly. I want leaders who, as I said before, who lead sort of from the bottom, in a sense, right? I want leaders who are autonomous and sort of take responsibility, but also collaborative, who work together with their peers, right? I want leaders who take risk, but do it prudently, right? So that's that sort of formula of people who are comfortable with those types of paradoxes is what I'm looking for. Yeah.
On a personal level, where you're in the energy business, how do you work or what do you do to get your energy levels high and to keep that energy? Because to innovate, to create, you need a lot of energy. So where does that energy come from? What resources you need?
That's a good question. So I would say, how do I recharge, maybe is another way to put it. I mean, I try to stay exercised. Yeah. So I do a lot of running. I'm actually preparing for a half marathon in about a month's time. So that's a very important part of my regime. I try to read a lot. Yeah. I get a lot of energy from that. I spend a lot of time with my family. I try to do that. And frankly, I mean, there's also place for me is very important, right? So I actually spend a lot of time in the summers in Maine, where I have a home, and I spend a lot of time outdoors, a lot of time hiking, a lot of time outside hiking, sailing, doing things that actually, and I get a lot of energy from that. But ultimately, it's also, I think for me the being involved in a company where transparency is a very personal company, sort of being yourself is really part of the culture. That also gives me energy. I don't have to worry about who I am, because I can just be me.
Who you are, exact. What could be next for you? Where do you want to be in the next 5 years?
So for me, the real ambition to be carbon negative. Yeah. I'll give you sort of some of these ideas. So if the world of BECCS could be 4 billion tons a year, and let me describe a little bit where that number comes from. So what we did is we did a lot of work in sort of at a macro level, and we worked with McKinsey on this, and said, if you applied the Drax sustainability rules, which are a bit more strict than the ones that actually are in law or regulation in the UK. And you did that on a global basis. So you're only taking residuals from harvests. You're not chopping down any trees to make pellets. It's only a byproduct of what needs to be done. If you don't go into areas where you would be harming biodiversity, et cetera, all of those rules would apply. We think that there's enough biomass available annually to do that, let's say 4 billion tons of carbon removal. If that becomes the industry that I think it can become, because I think that would enable us to decarbonize faster and less expensively than if we didn't do that, then there's a massive global business opportunity for us, right?
Yeah, and a massive impact.
And a massive impact, exactly. And what better way of, for me, as a personal ambition to have both an impact and build a company, that's exactly what I would love to do. Yeah.
At Earthworm, we've got 5 values. It's honesty, truth, compassion, humility, and courage. Which one do you identify the most with?
It's interesting. I'll start from sort of where I think I am, and then maybe I'll see if I can fit it into those words. But for me, sort of being able to have conviction, sort of belief, and be able to, sort of, as I said before, be who I am, be honest and transparent all the time. That's absolutely key, right? So, to me, there is a huge element of honesty in that. Be able to say what you mean and mean what you say with no, in some senses, no filters. But also the whole question of conviction, right? Really to believe in something and want to make that happen. I think that's massively important. So I probably land on somewhere between courage, honesty, and truth. I think those ones are all very important for me.
Very cool. Just maybe lastly, to a young professional who wants to have an impact, looks at the world and see the increased polarization and maybe find there is no solution to this problem of climate change. It's all too big. What would you tell him or her?
So 2 things I would say. One, the most fundamental thing is be yourself, right? I mean, I find people often are looking to, where is it I want to get to and how do I get there? Whereas for me, life is a series of, call them doors that you go through, right? And every time you go through another door, the vista beyond is different, right? And so, in some ways, I think that applies also to the whole battle against climate change. And if you try to see the massively big picture, it can get very daunting and very sort of overwhelming. But if you say, in the case of Drax, we're one small company, we're trying to do one specific thing, let's focus on doing that. Have confidence that if we do that, maybe the rest of the pieces will fall into place and continue to work in that way. So it's almost like there's, pay attention to the impact that you can have as an individual. Do that every day. Don't worry about where it gets you or necessarily the things around you. And I would say generally good things will happen.
Well, that's a great message. Thank you. Thank you, Will.
No, thank you.